Hi, welcome back to the Joy of Tennis Teaching. I want to take a moment to thank so many people that reached out to me and shared how much they appreciated my last video, the tribute to Peter Burwash. It was obviously an emotional video to do, and I'm glad that so many of you felt the same way about Peter. Besides the amazing comments that I received, one thing that I was fascinated by was the variety of ways that we have to communicate today. In the past week, I've received a number of very moving phone calls. Thanks Jim McGarry and Chris Numbers and Kevin Conley and so many others. I've received text messages from so many that I can't even remember which ones were which. There were Facebook comments that were really heartwarming to receive, and it also gave me a chance to look at some of the other wonderful tributes. I think Eric Gottschalk had an especially great, moving tribute to Peter. There were Facebook Messenger messages. So many of those, and a big thank you to Sebastian Leroux. I'm going to talk about Sebastian in some later videos and hopefully interview him on camera. So thank you, Bass, and yes, please, let's try to talk soon. And then, of course, there were many comments on the YouTube channel itself. I believe it's Nathan Miller, and if I'm getting your name wrong, Nathan, I apologize, but Nathan is a new viewer, and that's one of the things that I'm very excited about, is not just hearing from and communicating with so many old friends and close friends and people that I've worked with over the years, but also that we're hitting some other people that are finding some value in this. So that's a little moment of appreciation. Let's get to this week's topic. This week's topic kind of comes out of my conversation with Jim McGarry, but it's a topic I had planned on doing for a long time. And that is the idea of the number one secret to making your lesson more successful. And before I share this secret, let's define what a successful lesson is. Now, you might think a successful lesson is somebody that rebooks, a student that's happy with the lesson. And that's a great evaluation method. But in this context, let's talk about the successful lesson being the lesson where you, the teaching pro, feels like your message really landed, like your student is going away understanding the main focus of the lesson, and you feel very confident that they can implement it physically, that there's really some lasting improvement on this lesson. So how do we get this amazing, transformation into our lessons? Well, I think it comes down to something that I call teaching opportunities. Jim McGarry reminded me of it when he talked about teaching moments that we both experienced with Peter Burwash. The teaching opportunity or teaching moment is when the student is most receptive to the information that's coming in. Now, you might think, well, what do you mean by most receptive? Isn't the student who's paying for the lesson, aren't they going to be receptive all the time throughout that lesson? Well, intellectually, yes. If you ask the student, they'd say, oh yeah, of course I'm open to learning throughout the whole lesson. I'm paying for this lesson. But in reality, that's not how our attention works. That's not how our focus and our ability to retain information works. It fluctuates throughout the time of the lesson. So in order to make your lessons more successful, you, the teaching pro, must either recognize these teaching opportunities or find a way to create these teaching opportunities. Now let's talk about the teaching opportunities themselves. I believe there are four main teaching opportunities. Number one, when your student asks a question. Number two, when your student makes a mistake. Number three, when your student does something exceptionally well, hits a great shot. And number four, when you, the teacher, can ask a question that will capture the interest of your student. And let's take a look at each of these four things. Number one, when a student asks a question, this is the big one. This is by far the number one teaching opportunity that you're going to have in your lesson. Back in the early 90s, I spent a number of months where my main focus was coaching two young aspiring professional players from Indonesia, two young women, 14 and a 15-year-old. And they were super talented players and great to work with, and they tried hard. But culturally, two young women tennis players were never going to question an older male coach. So I was going months without having my students ask me any meaningful questions. I was always having to look for the other teaching opportunities or ask questions myself to create these teaching opportunities. And I'll never forget, one day I was on the roof of the pro shop at the Marriott's Desert Springs, and I was videotaping my two Indonesian girls playing a couple of sets. Jim Leupold was teaching a young high school player on the court next to my girls, so I could hear everything that was going on his court. And the young player, Stacy, was a talented high school player, but she wasn't in the league of the Indonesian girls in terms of skill level. But at one point in the lesson, Stacy, the young high school player, stopped and said, "Jim, I'm really frustrated with my backhand. Why am I having so many problems with my backhand?" Oh my God, I almost jumped off the roof of the pro shop. I wanted so much to answer her question after I've gone months without my students asking me any question. Jim was very capable of handling the question on his own and didn't need my help. And I managed to hold back from jumping off the roof. But it really, I'll never forget that, because it really emphasized to me again how valuable it can be to listen and look for questions from your students. If your students are asking you questions, stop whatever you're doing. That's the biggest teaching opportunity you're ever going to have. Teaching opportunity number two. When your student makes a big mistake. Let's say you've got a student with a one-handed backhand and you're teaching them the importance of how to use the left hand with the fingertips on the string to control the angle of the racket. And your student has hit a number of shots in the net and they're obviously very frustrated. This is the time where you can jump in and ease that frustration level, change their expectation, and explain to them how the angle of the racket and how they prepare the angle of the racket is what's going to determine the height of the ball coming in. If you can do this, you've gotten a chance to really maximize that teaching opportunity. Very similar to number two, number three is the teaching opportunity that you'll have when your student hits a great shot. I find this happens a lot when I'm teaching the serve. I will have taught my student to loosen up their grip and use their wrist on the serve, and they'll go ahead and pop a really great serve, big serve right in the corner, faster than they've ever hit a serve before. And you can tell, if you're paying attention, by the look on their face, their expression, maybe they'll even say something like, "Wow, where did that come from?" And that's a teaching opportunity. Jump in right there, praise them, catch them doing something right, and explain to them that you just did that great serve because you allowed your body to do what it does naturally. This kind of teaching opportunity I like even more than when they make a mistake, because it really is powerful to reinforce when they've done something right. Now, those first three teaching opportunities are dependent on your observation skills. They're dependent on you listening. They're dependent on you looking for clues in your students' body language, from you paying attention to where their ball goes. But you are dependent on the circumstances. You are waiting for those teaching opportunities to happen. The fourth category of teaching opportunities is something you can create. This is when you ask a question that will grab the student's attention. Again, you might be teaching this left hand, and you might ask the student, have you ever watched the pros? Have you noticed how many of the pros use the left hand as they're preparing their racket, or use the left hand in between to relax their hitting hand? The student is probably not aware of that. If you can show them a picture or a video, or just give them some examples, you've got a chance to create that teaching opportunity. So whatever it is, the main message that you are trying to convey in that lesson, always look for the teaching opportunities to hammer home that message. You might cover 3 or 4 things in a lesson, but when the teaching opportunities happen, cover that number 1 priority. Go for that. So I hope the secret to more successful lessons helps you. And again, I really appreciate the feedback that you've been giving me, but I'd like to ask everybody who's observing this video for another favor. If you enjoy these videos, if you think there's some valuable information here, please share them. Let's build a community. Let's get more views. Let's get more subscribers. Let's get more people watching these videos. Let's share this information. Thanks very much, and I hope the joy of tennis teaching continues to help you, and get out there and look for those teaching opportunities. See you next time. I'm Dan Obashan.